Criminal investigations don't collect answers, they collect probabilities. That distinction matters more than most people realize, because most of us, after watching enough crime content, reading enough breaking news, scrolling enough comment sections, have developed a habit. We decide. A clip appears, a motive surfaces, a behavior looks suspicious, and within hours, the case is closed. In our heads. The law, however, isn't interested in what people believe. It asks something much harder. Not what probably happened, but what can actually be proved? And those two questions are not always the same investigation. In the Ketan Agarwal case, the police believe they have a story. Phone records, digital trails, Snapchat conversations, location data. Investigators say they have evidence of motive, planning, and what they describe as coordination before the crime. They believe this case has a direction, and on paper, what they have assembled sounds formidable. So, here's the question worth sitting with. If the investigation is this strong, why are we still having this conversation? Because there's something investigators have acknowledged. Nobody actually saw what happened at the moment that mattered most. Nobody saw Ketan being pushed off the cliff. No eyewitnesses, no direct account, and in a courtroom, that changes everything. Now, here's something that almost never gets explained clearly. Evidence almost never speaks. Lawyers teach it how to speak. A Snapchat message doesn't tell a court that someone committed murder. It asks the court to infer intention. A phone call doesn't prove conspiracy, it proves communication. And communication is not conspiracy. Location data doesn't tell the court someone pushed Ketan. It tells the court someone was nearby. Being nearby is not murder. Now, every single piece in this case is not a conclusion. It is an invitation to make an inference, and criminal courts are very, very careful about which inferences they accept. Think of it like building a bridge, pillar by pillar. Now, individually, none of them gets you across. Together, they might. But here is the brutal mathematics of circumstantial evidence. If one important pillar fails, the bridge doesn't hold. The defense does not need to prove another story. They only need to create a reasonable doubt about yours. Siya Goyal and Chetan Chaudhary have declined the polygraph. For most people watching, that sounds like an admission of guilt. But legally, it is not. Because a polygraph is not a lie detector like everyone believes. That phrase is wrong, and it has caused enormous confusion for decades. The machine doesn't know whether you are lying. It knows whether your body reacts. Your breathing changes, your pulse shifts, your blood pressure moves, your skin begins conducting electricity differently because stress activates tiny sweat glands you cannot consciously control. The machine only records all of that. Then a human being asks the real question. Why did the body react? Because you lied, or because you are terrified, angry, or simply sitting in a room where someone is asking you about a murder you are accused of committing? The machine cannot answer that, which is why polygraph results are not admissible as proof of guilt in Indian courts. And refusing one, if you didn't know, is not proof of anything. There is another challenge that almost nobody discusses. Memory is not a recording. Memory is a reconstruction. After a tragedy, people naturally replay old conversations, old arguments. Small things that seemed completely unremarkable on a Monday can suddenly feel significant on a Friday after something has happened. Once you know how the story ends, everything before it starts looking like a clue. That phenomenon actually has a name. It's called hindsight bias. This doesn't mean witnesses are lying. It means they are human. And courts know this too, which is why they don't just ask what people remember. They ask when those memories first appeared, how they changed under questioning, whether the behavior felt suspicious at the time or only became suspicious after the news broke. That is one of the hardest questions any courtroom has to navigate, and in this case, it matters enormously. We have been here before. The Arushi Talwar investigation consumed this country for years. A family's tragedy became a television spectacle, Evidence was collected in a contaminated crime scene, theories multiplied, confessions were later discredited, witnesses contradicted each other, and after all of it, after all the certainty of the public verdict, the Supreme Court ultimately acquitted her parents. Because certainty outside a courtroom does not become proof inside one. That case taught a painful lesson to this country. The investigation that begins with a theory and tries to prove it often becomes a different investigation from the one that follows evidence and asks where it leads. Both are very different things. The question worth asking about every high-profile case is exactly this. Is this investigation following a theory or following the evidence? Sometimes those are the same direction, sometimes they are not. Now, every murder investigation tells two stories. The story investigators believe happened, and the story they can actually legally prove. Most of the time, those stories become the same. Evidence accumulates, links connect, the chain holds, proof beyond reasonable doubt is established, justice follows. But sometimes, and this is the part public opinion rarely stays with long enough to see, that the two stories diverge. Not because the investigation was wrong, not because the accused was innocent, but because proof and truth operate by different rules. Truth asks what happened. Proof asks what can be demonstrated beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law using evidence that can be challenged, tested, and scrutinized. That's an extraordinarily high standard, and it was designed to be. Because the alternative, a system where suspicion is treated as proof, where public certainty replaces legal rigor, has produced some of the history's worst injustices. The Ketan Agarwal case may ultimately produce a conviction, the evidence may be enough, every link in the chain may hold, or it may not. Not because the truth is unclear, but because the law does not ask us what we believe. It asks us what we can prove. And between those two questions lives the entire distance between justice and certainty. You are watching Fault Lines. I'm Abhijit.